Hello.
Hello, hello.
I just jumped on a call with Sky. I've approved the 050 changes, and then we're just debating who's going to merge theirs first.
Why is there a bunch of conflicts?
They'll both conflict with each other, aren't you? Just because they're changing the same lines. Hey, I win.
Hello.
Hello.
Ooh. All right, I'll just give everyone a couple minutes to join real quick. Todd did volunteer to be the scribe last time, so we'll have to find a new volunteer for next week. But we'll give people just a minute or two to join.
Is there any way to invert the color of a Google Doc without making a change? I would love to do that.
No idea. All right, I guess we can probably get started in just a second. Let's see. Okay, cool. Everyone have the link to the meeting notes. If not, I'm going to post it in Zoom real quick. So if you want to go ahead and join, if you have anything to add to the agenda, feel free. And yeah, I guess the first thing is if anyone first time at the meeting, if they feel like introducing themselves, please feel free to do so. If not, no big deal.
Hello, everyone. I'm Suraj. This is my first time joining an OpenFeature meeting. And yeah, I don't know what else to say.
No problem. Perfect. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, she's an active
Thanks for having me.
contributor to Captain and its ecosystem. So nice to see you at this call too.
Yeah, like.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you very much. All right. And then, like I mentioned, Todd volunteered to do scribe work for today. Do we have any volunteers for the next meeting?
Yeah, I can.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. Cool. All right. I guess we can jump right into it. Todd, it looks like you're first up on the agenda, and I'll just take notes while you're chatting. So
Yeah,
go ahead,
thanks.
please.
Yeah, so there's a PR there linked 139. This is important as we head towards 1.0 release of SDKs and a more stable spec. So this is not locking down our spec in any permanent way. The document statuses that are in that PR kind of outline how we are hoping to mark some parts of the spec as stable to give people confidence that they can start to develop. Will continue to really develop on these parts of the spec. So mostly focusing on just defining what stability guarantees there are. So have a quick read through that. It's not overly complicated, and leave any thoughts you have in there. But practically what we're kind of hoping to do is as we kind of approach KubeCon to mark potentially the provider interfaces and the evaluation API interfaces as stable, the ones that exist there. That doesn't mean we couldn't add new features, but it means that there'd be no breaking changes for those contracts without the kind of approval of the technical steering committee and like really good reasoning. We want to do this because obviously every time we make a breaking change to providers, the provider contract or the evaluation API, people have to absorb that, and we don't want to have to keep pushing that work onto all of our consumers. So that's the goal. Take a look at that document. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you think about the date of October 5th. I'll circle back to why that date's important probably on my next point. Does anybody have any questions about that now?
I have actually two. It states that experimental is a status, and then it says note no explicit status experimental at the very end.
Yeah, so if something isn't marked as like hardening or stable, you can assume it's experimental. Basically, that's what that's saying.
Okay.
It's just in the absence of a label, assume experimental.
Yeah, maybe we just need to rephrase it, but yeah, that was the intent there. It was just saying like, in case it wasn't explicitly stated, it means it's experimental.
Oh, okay.
And-
That's what it was, yeah.
Do
But
these
maybe we
map
can
to,
rephrase that.
sorry, I was just
Go ahead,
wondering, do
Dan.
these map to like CNCF guidelines also? Is that what it is for the statuses, or is it statuses we just determined?
So they were heavily inspired by a couple of other projects. One was OpenTelemetry. I also had a look at a couple of other projects that have specifications in them, and they had very similar language. But it's not, as far as I know, there's no CNCF definition around this. The whole idea is really just to give, our consumers some kind of level of guarantees of stability with certain parts of the API.
Cool,
Yeah, I think
thanks.
I think semantically it's even similar to what Kubernetes is doing, also the wording is different. Like there's this early stage where changes can happen at any time. And then there's this stage where, okay, changes require deliberate decision by a committee, but they can still be breaking. And then there's this stuff is not going to break without any major version changes. Kind of stage. That's like what I think alpha, beta, GA is available in Kubernetes. The only comment that I would make, what I like about the Kubernetes approach, is that I make recommendations for end users. Like for an experimental feature, we recommend not using this for production level code. It might not be that relevant for code, but they just make, okay, don't use this if you want to use it in any critical systems. I think that's what they do for experimental. They guarantee that for hardening, which is their beta, you can upgrade from the current version to the newer version, but it might involve manual work, which might be substantial.
I think that's a really good addition. I'm okay with adding that. I can try and capture that in the PR and make that addition. I think that's kind of what I had in my head, but it's good to explicitly put it there. I think that's a good point. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of also go into details too, we did look at OpenTelemetry to see what they were doing. They have quite a bit more complicated problem they're trying to solve. So theirs is a little bit more in depth. So that we did a modified version of that. They also did not have anything like a hardening status, which I thought personally was pretty important. They actually went from experimental to stable with a freeze in between. And the freeze could actually be like, you could freeze it. And that could either be because the maintainers wanted to focus on other topics, and it actually bumped back to experimental later. And we didn't like that approach. We thought like once it kind of graduated to like a hardening stage, we wouldn't want to ever move it back to experimental. It's just not really fair to people. So that was the inspiration there.
Yeah, I wonder why they would do that, but we can have follow-ups on that offline.
Yeah, if it's interesting food for thought, go ahead, Elise.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think the difference there in the semantics is experimental. We try this out and see whether it's a good idea. And I think the hardening is, we think this is a good idea, but we're not 100% sure we got it right already.
I think that's a good way
That's
to.
why I don't want to remove it. Like the functionality won't go away anymore, but we might have built it in a way that's not exactly how we want it to have.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I was only going to say, Dan, if you're interested, especially in that, the OTel thing with the feature freeze, it's I can send you the link. I can maybe Mike can even pull it up, or I'll put it in the document later. But yeah, I mean, I'd say their feature freeze is pretty similar to hardening. It's just not unidirectional. Like it can kind of be applied and go both ways. I don't know.
Yeah, this is just interesting to me. I've never run across it before, so would like to dig a little bit more into it. But the current statuses seem good to me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was one of those things where it's only like 3 sentences, but it took Todd and I like 4 hours to write it. So, but any feedback would be really appreciated here, because it's like it really took a lot of effort to decouple like spec statuses from like code, you know, and I do think there is a clear distinction. I think that's the next topic Todd wants to talk about, is like the SDKs versus the spec. But this is definitely focused more on like the spec, which I think we can be a little bit, you know, better about kind of locking it in some reasonable way. And another kind of interesting note to specifications is like technically, unless you have contradictions in your spec, there is no bug in a spec. And so that's another interesting way to kind of look at it. And yeah, something that challenged us as we kind of wrote the statuses. Cool, perfect. Yeah, any feedback on that? There is an issue open for those that don't have the link. Here's the notes, and there is a link to the pull request there. You know, feedback on the statuses would be very much appreciated. So everyone's on the same page. And yeah, hand it off to Todd again for the SDK portions.
Yeah, so we had another round of we had a change in the spec 050, which Mike released earlier this week, I think. And we've consumed that in a couple of SDKs now. We at least have PRs open for it. But as we've said before, we really want to head towards a 1.0. I personally really hope that that's the last round of spec changes before we kind of move into a hardening phase. We won't know that really until everybody's kind of implemented and played with things for a while. But I again have the date October 5th. I'm hoping that all the current round of changes to be absorbed. So basically to get the SDKs up to 050 of the spec is done by October 5th. I think we're well on our way to meeting that goal. I'd like then to have all of the providers updated. That might be a little bit of a tall order. I'm certainly going to do my best to update all of the community providers that are in my purview. So Java, JavaScript, stuff like that. But there's going to be some vendor providers. We'll try and reach out to those maintainers. The changes are not huge, so I don't think it'll be too difficult. But I'd like to have those all done by the 12th, the following week. And I'd like to be basically have candidate release clients for the following week after that for the SDK, which may not have any changes. But just so that we could say, okay, all of our providers are up to date, all of our providers are working. This looks like our 1.0 for KubeCon. That's where I would like to be, and from a timeline perspective. That's just my proposal. If you disagree, if you think that's too ambitious, if you think it's not ambitious enough, let me know. But we don't have an issue or anything like that. I can certainly capture that in an issue if people feel like that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think the main thing is it's super important that we stabilize the SDKs as soon as possible, and then hit the 1.0 so we can follow semantic convention. It's just too tedious for every provider and everything to upgrade every time we introduce breaking changes. So we ripped the Band-Aid off basically over the last 2 weeks and made all of the major changes that we were aware of. And so once all that stuff's out there, hopefully providers can be updated and we're basically in a good state for a 1.0 release. So that was the main goal here. Hopefully the timeline isn't too aggressive, but I did want to make sure that we had like hard dates there that we could shoot for. And we can modify it a little bit, but I'd like to kind of lock in like dates and targets so we can really work towards having it ready by October 17th timeframe.
Yeah, I think it's also helpful getting the tutorials ready that we're working on, because otherwise we would invest a lot of time into writing tutorials, which is always a lot of work just to having them redo them right after, because the SDK would change.
100%. I mean, every time we do a breaking change, it becomes an insane amount of work that becomes even more complex as there's more providers and documentation available and everything. So yeah, stabilization is critically important here. But we didn't want to do it at the expense of having a bad SDK. So like that was the balancing act that we were trying to deal with. And I think we're in a good spot now. I'm pretty happy with the SDKs that, you know, I've played around with personally. And so, yeah, I think we're good, but we do want to have that extra, like maybe week of additional hardening and just kind of encourage people to check it out. Like now is a great time to see, you know, what works and what potentially doesn't. And if there are breaking changes that, you know, basically need to be made, this is the time to do it. So, yeah, that's all I'll say to that.
I have a quick question on too. The timelines look good to me. Are we doing any framing around the 1.0? So like that it's spec 1.0 and compliant? Because I don't know of anyone that's actually using this in the wild yet, you know, in that sense of like stability 1.0. I don't know if I'm being clear on, you know, there's two kind of differences where there can still be some unknown bugs. No one's really exercised it in production workloads that I'm aware of. But it is compliant to the 1.0 spec.
Yeah, so I
So
think that's
I'm-
actually the difference there. So like not necessarily saying like a 1.0 spec, it would be like we're in this hardening phase, you know, just in case, you know, once it is, you know, more widely used, if there is some like insanely like breaking change that we for some reason didn't consider, we have the ability to add that in. The other part is like the SDKs, since they're kind of decoupled from like the versioning of the spec, like we can just bump a major version of like, say, the Java SDK to address any like major breaking changes. That would be also doable.
Yeah, so we just to circle back, just to make sure everybody's on the same page on this one, we had an earlier conversation in one of the meetings where we decided consciously to decouple spec versions from SDK versions. So, and I think there, especially recently, there's been a lot of good reasons why this is a good idea. I'll specifically talk about Go. So Go, we realized, oh, it'd be a good idea to include the context, the Go context, the context.context. Is how you'll see it in a lot of used in a lot of APIs. We wanted that to be available in the flag evaluation calls, but that's not something we spec out because it's completely related to Go, right? So if you were to, you could have a totally compliant Go SDK and then decide to have a breaking change where you introduce context, right? And it's no less or more compliant to the OpenFeature spec, but it's a change in how that particular SDK works. So that's kind of why we want to decouple the SDK versions from the spec versions. But for 1.0, but going the other way, obviously, if there's a spec change, that obviously means there's going to be breaking changes in every SDK, right? So we want to have a spec heading towards stability, so that if there is a breaking change in the spec, so that we can be confident there's not going to be a breaking change in the spec that would force everybody to have breaking changes in all of their implementing SDKs. That's what we want to avoid.
And a
yeah.
valid point from Dan here is, I think we should we be explicit that provider versions do not reflect spec versions? Like if the spec is 1.0, that doesn't necessarily mean that the provider is 1.0. It is just using the 1.0 specification version. It can still be a 0.2 version of a
Well,
provider.
the provider is different. So in this case, it'd be the SDK. And right now we do markets like this is like, you know, a particular version release of the spec. And so that's how I've been like, whenever we do a big spec change, I would create an issue in all the different SDKs. And like, once it's compliant, we throw the little spec badge up on the SDK. The versions themselves are kind of arbitrary. I've just been bumping by minor version numbers every time we do something. And I guess that would be one thing to maybe chat about if we want to do semantic pieces, but that's back to the potential problem of technically, you know, bugs shouldn't exist in a spec unless there's contradictions. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just wondering then for like the SDKs being 1.0, I don't know. I personally subscribe more to like the hashy model of like 1.0 is well after like usage in production and everything, but it's a minor point. That's what I was just trying to sort out was, you know, how that aligns.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
Yeah.
balance is like the stability guarantee. So, I mean, I guess version maybe itself doesn't matter, but like we have to give people the confidence that we're not just gonna like change a bunch of stuff like the next day. And so that's the balancing act. I think the adoption will be low until we have that guarantee, to be honest. So
I
Yeah,
agree
good
though,
point.
Dan. I'm not married to a 1.0 as a label. It's a meaningful label because it does instill some confidence, but I don't think we need to do a 1.0. I think we need to have messaging that says this is stable. You should move into production with this, or we're confident you're now able to move into production with this. At least try hardening it in your QA environments and stuff like that. So whether or not we choose 1.0, we just have to have that kind of messaging that's clear.
Yeah, and that works for me. That's what I was just wondering around.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And that's also kind of one of the challenges that we ran into too when we're talking about it. It's like, if we open it up to a bunch of people and say like, it's time to use it, and then all of a sudden there's just some almost embarrassing, level of thing that we like omitted or, forgot to think about, like it'd just be a bummer if we had no ability to change it. So we're kind of trying to be careful with the language, but we also want to make sure that it's like, we are fairly confident we're in a good spot, and now's a good time to start, using it and providing feedback. And if there is something like that, we have the out to make changes, but we're pretty confident that we've covered at least the basics of feature flagging.
So in our own wording, this means we're currently in hardening stage.
Effectively, yeah.
Then we should state it that way if we want to use that wording. So hardening means when we think it works. Worst case, we will need to change something, but we're not intending to.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Yeah, just use that stability kind of guarantee all over the place. It's like this is we're effectively in hardening mode.
I'm almost tempted to add your like simple wording to the document statuses, Alois. The like we think this works. I can't remember exactly how you put it there, but it might be good to put like TLDRs. We think this works, but we're testing it. Like I actually kind of like how well that boils it down. But yeah, maybe we want to be more official.
Well, at least a little bit more like we don't think this works, but like it's got to be a little bit stronger language.
We won't take it away,
that.
but we can make it blink differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think it helps. I mean, we can do it, but why not? I mean, it's I think even some of the OpenTelemetry doc have some very easy wording in the beginning, more casual than what it actually really means for people who want to go deeper.
Yeah. I'm not saying we should remove the highly technical wording, but I think adding some really basic wording will, helps drive the point home.
That's what you take the non-native speaker for. I mean, this is almost language magic,
Okay, so I think my takeaway is I'm gonna add an issue to talk about these things, and then like we can talk specifically in that issue about whether we want to do a 1.0, like some of the things Dan brought up. I think those are good, put in an issue. So I'm gonna capture kind of what's in this subpoint in a discussion, and then we can talk about exactly the strategy we want to use. But it sounds like we're mostly on the same page with a few tweaks.
I have one question regarding because before the 1.0 will be released, I think from my point of view, the Java SDK have a name in a package. Java SDK looks kind of little bit weird. I cannot say this is quite often the package itself. They add Java to the package name. Like I can see someone use Kotlin when they want to make it clear this class was written in Kotlin, but it's not very common to use Java to. I mean, even if compared to gRPC, OpenTelemetry, they drop like something like clearly say Java, and if compared to other, I don't know, Go and other libraries, they don't bring kind of namespace like Go or any language. So maybe before 1.0 can drop the Java SDK from the package name.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I'm not against that. We probably want to talk to Justin Abrams. He's one of the core maintainers of Java. But yeah, so you're saying the package name would be dev.openfeature.sdk or something like that, not Java-SDK, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I kind of agree, to be honest. I think it's not a bad point, and this is since we have breaking changes already, it's probably not the worst time to do it. We should talk to Justin specifically. We could, I mean, I'd encourage you to make an issue in the Java SDK if you feel that way.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't think it's a bad idea. We can at least have the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I guess that's it for me. Like I said, I'm going to create an issue to capture some of that stuff, and I guess we'll pass it on to James.
Sure. So mine's just a quick one leading on from what we've already been discussing. So we've had a sort of wave of breaking changes coming into the Go SDK. Just going to let you know what those are, and then sort of give the pseudo guarantee that hopefully we won't have any more coming in before KubeCon. So the first one we mentioned already, the introduction of context.context is really common across many Go packages. So it's good to have it, and it's popped in as the first argument. We've had the flattened evaluation context, so that decouples the provider facing API from the client facing API. Just prevents break and change in the future if we add anything in on the client side. And then we've also got the changes required for the 050 spec release. So those have all been added in, and we should be doing a release either today or tomorrow. Just depends how quickly we will work to get everything ready. But yeah, just let you know that all those breaking changes coming in. So it should be clear now to sort of put providers together for the Go SDK.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, James. All right. Looks like I have the next few topics. And again, if anyone has any topics to add, feel free to add it. I'll relink the docs again. But real quick, I'm just gonna give a quick update. One of the things that we had noticed was the playground, which was originally, intended for like kind of experimentation purposes, but kind of pivoted more towards a demo. Hadn't been updated in quite a while. In fact, like certain things didn't even work, and some of the examples were completely broken. So basically, I spent a decent amount of time this week prepping an updated demo, make it a lot easier to run. And then Todd's actually working at kind of beautifying the UI too, so it looks less like a hackathon project and more like a real demo. So I'll just quickly show you what we've been up to. This does not have the updated UI, so that's I guess a teaser for later. And there is a massive branch right now called Updated Demo if you're interested in kind of following what we're doing. But it's based on a lot of the feedback that we had in the past, and the main idea is it all runs in Docker Compose, and in the UI itself, if you've configured different vendors, it will show up in a dropdown, and you can basically hot select a different vendor to have that control the feature flag itself. Out of the box, it will ship with flag D and Go feature flag as well, and that all kind of just runs in the respective containers. And so I'll show you quickly what it would look like if I were to start it. So just a Docker Compose up. You can see that there's 3 different containers that start, and then we have our demo application. So if I bring this over here, this is the normal demo app that we've had for quite a while. Like I said, the UI itself will hopefully get a bit of a facelift, by the end of the week. And then the demo scenario will slightly be updated, but I think the basic story will remain the same. But what you can see down here is a selector now. So you'll see in this case, it's running on flag D. And if I were to change a color, let's just say green, basically that saves it behind the scenes, and hopefully this works. But of course it won't because it's a live demo. Oh, there it goes. Okay, cool. So yeah, there we go. Basically, this is just the regular flag D, flag configuration. When you make an update here, it saves it to disk and then gets reloaded. So like nothing crazy, but it's kind of nice because it's all self-contained and easy to run. If you want to try, a different, say we want to try a vendor, I'll just show you the harness one because it was something that I had just set up just a little bit ago. But let me go back to this one actually. And if I were to show you harness, what it's going to do is it will, after a second, it will slide the little like editor away because it no longer applies. And now if I go into harness and look at the little feature flags here, we could just go ahead and say, and let me actually split the screen a bit. If we go back to here and let's just change the color to red and save it. It's all, fairly standard feature flagging stuff, but you see that basically without reloading, I can just change which provider is powering the demo. And then it goes back to like more, the vendor, UI and workflows around flag management and stuff, and they can really start telling a story about that. So I think it's a pretty cool way to do it. You can really see that like it didn't require code change. It didn't require, anything beyond just setting, a different provider. And it just works. So yeah, feedback would be appreciated on this, but this is what we're working on. Hopefully it's available by the end of the week, and we'll have sections for each, setting up each vendor to get the flags configured properly. So it has like the, like for example, the fib algo can have like rule sets here. So in this case, we're looking at the currently logged in user. If it ends in at fast, it will show or it will run a different algorithm. And so like that's one thing as well that we'll show how to do that. So in this case, if you click on it without being logged in, it takes a while. It's running an inefficient algorithm. And then if we were to quickly log in and run it, it should be really fast. So that should also work across all vendors as well. So I'll make sure we add documentation in there so that people can go set up, the launch darkly or the harness or whatever. And if there is any kind of like, sign up code or whatever that you'd like us to include in the docs, definitely let me know, and we can add it as part of like the, if you don't have an account, click this link or use this code or whatever. But I think this would be hopefully a nice way to get people exposed to it really easily, because it's just your run Docker Compose. And then if you want to, test it out with a different, vendor, it's really easy to just register it and it will show up in the list. So any questions on that?
Just to confirm, Mike, I think the answer to this is yes, but the availability of a certain vendor is just determined based on whether or not you have a credential set up in your environment, right? Is that
exactly? Right? Yep. So I'll show, or we'll definitely have that in the documentation, but basically in the .env here, if you set up a token, it will basically automatically be pulled into the Docker Compose, and then it will show up as in the list. So that's all that it really takes. It's not any more advanced than that. Obviously, if you haven't set up the feature flags in those environments, you won't be able to toggle anything. But that's all it takes to basically add a new tool to the list. Cool.
Cool.
Let's see here. And then I guess real quick too, one thing that we are including right now inside the Docker Compose file is Jaeger. And so if you want to play around with like what different feature flags would look like. So for example, if I wanted to filter on, just look here. Hopefully I can find an operation for the Fibonacci piece. Here. So this is kind of cool. It's a nice way to like filter on requests based on, OpenTelemetry data and see like kind of the impact on response time. So in this case, we had like, these ones are running the Binet algorithm. So they were, about 3 to 4 milliseconds. This one is running recursive, which was 7. So it's kind of an interesting way to visualize that, even though they're the same request. So it's a nice way to kind of slice and dice the data, and something that's, I would encourage you to play around with if you have any interest. And it's all just available in the demo.
If you drill down into those, you can see the feature flag values in those bands, right?
Yep, exactly. So if we went into here, you'd see fib algo here. You'd see that this is recursive. This came from harness. And so basically that would happen automatically if the provider has the name set properly. You'd see like which vendor, basically was responsible for the flag evaluation. Cool. All right, let me see. I think I had a couple other notes here as well. Yeah, so yeah, if you're interested, definitely follow that branch and let us know if there's anything that you'd like to add or see. We're going to try to get it out there, and then as soon as it is available, I mean, it's a good opportunity to provide feedback, improve the documentation, whatever is appropriate once you have a chance to play with it, would be helpful. All right, so completely changing topics now and going to KubeCon. If you are going to be at KubeCon, I have a quick sign up form. I would encourage you to basically let us know that you're going to be there, so I can go ahead and try to schedule some gatherings while we're there. The Dynatrace office is actually in Detroit, or we have one in Detroit. So we could either go to the Dynatrace office, we could find something at the event space, or, you know, whatever. We'll find opportunities to meet up. So certainly let us know if you're going to be there, and we'll be in contact. We also have a booth. So if you are in the Slack channel, you'll see that I posted our booth hours and where the booth will be located. If you're interested in helping out at the booth, you know, let us know. You're more than welcome. And if you're interested in just swinging by, you know, I definitely encourage you to do that as well. Any questions about that? Okay. And then I think well, I have two more, but next one is basically the website and kind of the documentation consolidation. Right now we have kind of a very basic, almost placeholder-y site on our main domain, and then a subdomain for documentation. I think there could be a good argument made that there's no reason to have the main website, and we could just basically drop into essentially the documentation. It's easier to update, edit, you know, it would be one repo instead of two. It's, you know, not a different subdomain. There's a lot of things I think that make it compelling. And so I just kind of want to throw that out there and see if anyone had any strong feelings one way or the other, but it could be pretty easy to basically move the docs to openfeature.dev, remove the existing, you know, site essentially, or move whatever is appropriate over to the doc site, because we can customize that landing page, you know, to our heart's content. And then we just have a single place where you can see, like, you know, our blogs and our docs and all of that type of stuff. So not sure if there's any thoughts on that, but I thought it was, Justin had brought it up in an issue a couple days ago, and I thought it was a pretty good idea and certainly worth considering. Any thoughts on that?
Sounds good to me. I don't see a reason to keep them separate if we're not getting additional value and it's just overhead.
Yeah, I mean, right now the existing page is kind of ugly and definitely doesn't have a ton of content. So it's one of those things where it'd be kind of nice to just move off of it if unless we're going to invest time and energy into making it like a nice, you know, marketing landing page. So, which I don't think we will, honestly, at least not at this stage.
Well, we might actually will. So.
Oh, okay.
People. I mean, I'm not saying we do it because we haven't talked about it. I think that's one of the, and it's the governance topics then eventually as well. I think we need to guide people maybe a bit more through feature flagging and what they can do.
I agree.
But I think we're merging it with docs. That's the idea, right? Do you want to merge the dev with the docs page?
Yeah, basically. I mean, we still have full control of like the main landing page, and we can make it look pretty, you know, nice still. But it's just like, you know, do we want to have two completely separate repos that kind of just dump you off into the docs, which is the case right now. So I don't think it prevents us from doing what you're talking about. It just kind of makes it more clear where you would add that content.
I think from other projects, the experiences tend to make them separate again for a number of reasons, because you might run a different tech stack for documentation than you run for the main website.
Could be. I mean, DocuSource supports just like React and stuff, so it'd be pretty easy to just throw in custom React pieces. But yeah, we can certainly talk about it. Like, I'm not totally convinced, but I do think it's a pretty good idea, and we should probably do something before KubeCon and make sure like the kind of the happy paths and the value props are clear to everyone when they first go to the page. By the way, Dan, if you are gonna go to KubeCon and you haven't purchased your ticket yet, we do have discount codes available if you don't have one already. So just let us know.
Okay, cool, thanks. I might reach out about it.
Sure. And anyone else too on the call, if they haven't purchased a ticket yet, just let me know on Slack and I'll get you a discount code. It's like 20% off, so not insignificant. So you can put it towards dinner for us. All right, at any rate. Cool, it looks like Eloise is next then.
Yeah, I mean, this was just based on the issue that I handed in that on my request joining the governance board. So the main reason is this is still there. Or to clarify, this is still the bootstrapping governance board. Main reason is that obviously we had an initial governance board, but this was not like widely active so far, and obviously this is now going to be the goal is really to drive it towards activity. You can read in the issue what the goals actually are. It's really like setting up governance meetings, which are right now not happening, helping with the enhancement process, which we have already, but like making it more formal and involving more people. Also work on some of the charter work. Some of these documents are very early work in progress. Also to help us on what's included and what's not included. We keep having more of those discussions. And yeah, also working more on and supporting the TC and maintainers and others on building an actual roadmap for the next 12 months, or at least like for the next couple of months, but ideally with it 12 months. Goal. And last but not least, I think what we will also need, as we need to grow on the end user side. So I think we're very good on the contributor side when it comes to OpenFeature, but we need to really invest about this and to really like build a user outreach group. That's one question.
I agree with the goal. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I got
ahead.
actually all the votes from the governance board. There is no official vote right now because it's the unselected seat, but I was reaching out to them. And that's actually my goal. So just what this is about. And again, I think we initially stated like half a year in, which would put us into next year, April, there will be an official governance board vote anyways. Also, Mike and I talked, if anybody feels uncomfortable with 2 Dynatrace people being on the governance board for the time being, please let us know and we'll figure it out. That this is obviously not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree that getting the governance board's help in improving end user adoption seems super important to me. I mean, that seems like what I agree. We have really good maintainer adoption. End user adoption needs to be our focus now. So it would be good to have more guidance from the governance board on how we can kind of shoot for that.
All right.
All right, it looks like I have one more, and I think David may be added in this last one. So I think I know what he's meaning by it, but yeah, I don't know for sure. So at any rate, the next topic was Hacktoberfest. So we had, Todd and I thought at first at least that it was a good idea and something we may want to take advantage of. We came up with kind of a high level proposal of what it could potentially look like. There was some concern in the Slack channel that it may just like be potentially a bunch of noise. And so, it's a little unclear if we want to do it or not. I think what is very clear though, is that some of the proposals do make sense still, even if we don't participate in Hacktoberfest, but just allowing people like a very clear guide if they want to add a provider or a hook, like what that process looks like, which would mean creating, better or adding contributor guides, creating, issue templates, and then a process for like when an issue is created, like if it's approved, assigning it to the appropriate people and having that process be pretty easy to follow, so people know how to add those pieces. And I think that's going to be an important part of the project. So I do think like that makes sense to me. It's just whether or not we want to add the Hacktoberfest label. And honestly, like I kind of want to try it, but I do understand that it could become a pain. But maybe at that point we just stop adding the labels. So I guess my proposal is like we could do it either in all contribs or maybe just the JS contrib. And because that's something that Todd and I can definitely handle. If it becomes overwhelming, we basically just rip out the Hacktoberfest pieces and just say like, we're not participating this year, essentially. So any thoughts on that, pro or against Hacktoberfest? So I've only participated from like a developer, not from a maintainer. So I don't really know what what it's going to be like.
Do we have any idea of the expected volume from it too, or is it kind of like tag it and just see if people contribute?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's probably similar to like the good first issue type stuff, where actually like there's bots and a bunch of things that pick it up, and so like and the quality, I think, could really be across the board. I mean, you could get some probably really amazing pull requests and some that are like, I'm here for a t-shirt. So I think that's the
Got it.
challenge.
Yeah, so usually you get a few active contributors who submit something big, and it's still a good way to raise awareness about the project because many experienced open source contributors also look at dashboards, so they see some highlights based on technology, etc. So having everything in place leads to some organic traffic, even if you don't actively promote. At the same time, if you expect to have dozens of experienced developers and companies joining Oktoberfest, it's not going to happen. Still, well, sometimes you can get someone and retain over the course of months and years in the community. But yeah, I would definitely advise against creating a bunch of newcomer-friendly issues like update documentation here and there, because the maintenance overhead is tremendous and the outcome isn't big. So maybe actually advising otherwise, try doing some integrations, etc. There are plenty of projects that would benefit from integrating feature flags. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, totally my experience was, and some of the one we had in the past was that people were just creating very low quality PRs, and it created way more work than benefit. I think I have a very different opinion from Google Summer of Code, but people are trying I mean, they're just getting a t-shirt, and that's pretty much the effort they put into it. The effort that you would put into for getting a t-shirt. So I think the Kubernetes project was very verbose last year about Hacktoberfest. I think it wasn't friendly at all because it was more or less spamming most of the work that they were doing there. So that's why I would be against it. I mean, I'm not the one who at the end of the day has to look at all of those PRs, to be fair.
We will tag you, but yeah, no.
Well, you can't tag me, but
Now that you mention it, yeah, you're going to be auto included on all the PRs. But no, I mean, I think point taken, but I think that's also why we try to have the guidelines too, where it's like you'd only get the label if you've followed the process, and then it's very like isolated. Like, you know, contributing to Kubernetes is a significantly higher barrier than writing like, you know, a basic validation hook or something. So we'll see. It could be a huge mistake, and I guess we'll deal with the consequences if it is. But I'd like to try it until it's a problem, and then we'll see. Okay, cool. And then the last thing that we have on here is KubeCon swag. I think this is likely David had written this, and I don't have a ton of the details yet. But I am trying to figure out something that we could do, especially around like for like maintainers, that especially that would be at KubeCon, but you know, some of the core people that helped really get it to the state it is now, like getting something for those people. And so figuring out, especially like if there's any like, you know, vendors or companies that want to help basically like, you know, pool some resources to help kind of make this a reality. I think that would be kind of what we're looking at now. Not sure if anyone on the call is in a place that they could, you know, escalate to some, you know, marketing team, or if there's any kind of like budget available for this type of stuff. But if there is any interest, we're trying to kind of work through that and see what we could do, you know, for some kind of like maintainer gift or something of some sort, just to keep people, you know, interested and kind of, you know, thank them for the hard work over the last, you know, 7 months or so. So that's an idea. It's still kind of a work in progress, but if it's something that you're interested in, you know, try to contact me and we can try to work through the details. We have to move quickly though. The order has to be in like in the next couple of weeks and or sooner for it to be a reality. So yeah, I think, and that was not my issue, but I think that's what David was meaning by this, and he's on vacation, so I'm filling in. Cool. That's it for the meeting notes. Does anyone else have anything else to add real quick?
Yeah, maybe one quick note. So Alex Jones just submitted a request to join the governing board too. So if you could vote there, it would be also nice.
Okay.
I shared the link in the chat.
Sounds good. Okay. Anything else? All right, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, bye.